A very good morning to respected teachers and respected seniors, dear colleagues and residents. Today's presentation is from Department of Medical Genetics, Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital. I myself, Dr. Rekha Gupta. I have done my MS in Option Gynae and I have done DM in Medical Genetics, and other companion is Dr. Aditi Singh. So, as a genetic department, services which we offer to our hospital are first a genetic OPD, second we offer fetal medicine services, and third genetic lab services. So, as a genetic OPD, we cater the patient with genetic disorders. These are undiagnosed rare disorders which come to our OPD either directly. Then we help the clinician in making the diagnosis so that they offer the appropriate management to these patients. And many times patients are referred to us from various branches like pediatrics, obstetrics, medicine, neurology, oncology, etc. And we help them to make their proper diagnosis by making clinical phenotype and offering the genetic test. In fetal medicine, we offer the couple the genetic counselings, and along with the genetic counseling, we offer ultrasound scans. In ultrasound scans, we do some specific scans, one at 12 to 13 weeks of pregnancy. We call it as nuchal translucency and nasal bone scan. This scan is FMF Fetal Medicine Foundation UK certified at our center. And along with this, we also do level 2 or anomaly scans and growth scans and IUGR scans in pregnancy. Along with these scans in fetal medicine, we also offer antenatal procedures, and these procedures have many indications. Like sometimes baby have risk for congenital malformation or congenital disorders. So in these cases, we take sample from the baby. It is either taken from placenta or from the amniotic fluid. We call it as amniocentesis and chorionic villus sampling, and then we process the sample into the lab and we offer the definitive diagnosis to the fetus. And sometimes in IVF pregnancy, there are multi-fetal pregnancies. Fetuses in womb are more than 3, so that we reduce the number of fetuses, either 2 or 1, and so that maternal fetal outcome can be better. And sometimes there is RH sensitized pregnancies in which fetus develops anemia in utero. In such cases, we transfuse the blood in utero, we transfuse the blood to the fetus so that fetus can survive in utero. Then they are managed in an ICU after birth. Now Dr. Aditi will tell about the genetic lab, what she is doing here.
Good morning everybody, respected Sonkar sir, Saxena sir, ma'am, respected seniors and my dear friends. Today I'm going to talk about my department, which is Advanced Center for Medical Genetics. So what is it? It is an advanced genetic diagnostic laboratory. I'm very happy to say that it is the first vet laboratory in the state of Rajasthan. It caters both molecular as well as cytogenetic testing. We have the latest equipments, and also we have built a team which is very high skilled, which has come from all over India. So what we do at ACMG, we do our specialization is in karyotyping, that we do it from blood, bone marrow, amniotic fluid, chorionic villi sampling, product of conception, and also cord blood. We also do chromosomal breakage study for Fanconi anemia. We also do full fluorescence in situ hybridization, which is commonly known as FISH, for oncology panels, which is AML, ALL, CML, MTS, MM for breast cancer and also for lung cancer. We also do prenatal diagnosis for 5 chromosomes, which is 21, 18, 13 and X and Y. In the molecular part, we do PCRs that could diagnose the mutations for beta thalassemia, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, Y chromosome microdeletion, and we also do sperm DNA fragmentation. That's my team. We have 2 junior scientists, senior scientists, and 1 junior scientist, which has come from Chennai to work with us at ACMG. Thank you.
Now I invite Dr. Bansi to present the case today.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, sir, respected teachers, my seniors, my dear colleagues, and my juniors. I'm here to present a case of an infant with abdominal distension. So our case is of a 7-month-old male child accompanied by his mother, born via non-consanguineous marriage, came to Mahatma Gandhi in August 2022 with complaints of abdominal distension since last 3 months. Child was not gaining weight since last 3 months, was unable to sit with support, and there was a history of fever since last 5 days. Parents noticed the abdominal distension at the age of 4 months, which was progressive in nature and was not associated with constipation, diarrhea, or vomiting. Parents also noticed that the child was not gaining weight as compared to the other infants of the same age. There was complaint of not achieving milestones as compared to the previous child. There was a history of fever off and on, low grade, which got relieved on taking medications. Multiple consultations were taken in the past 3 months for abdominal distension, which was progressive and was also treated for fever off and on. There was history of 2 PEG cell transfusions for low hemoglobin at the age of 4 months. Child also consulted the medical colleges for the above complaints but didn't get relief, so came to Mahatma Gandhi Hospital for further evaluation and management. During the antenatal period, mother had severe oligohydramnios along with gestational hypertension. There was no history of rash, fever or any drug intake during the pregnancy. Child was born via cesarean section at 35 weeks with low birth weight of 1.8 kg and the postnatal period was uneventful. The immunization history was complete and family history of the maternal and paternal side was taken, and there was no similar complaints in the parents or other siblings. Child was exclusively breastfed. There was no history of jaundice or vomiting. There was no history of constipation or clay-colored or red-currant jelly stool. No history of excessive crying or seizures. There was no complaint of dribbling of urine or crying during micturition, and there was no history of fractures or bleeding manifestations. So quick review. So our case is a 7-month-old infant born at 35 weeks with low birth weight, with antenatal history of severe oligohydramnios and gestational hypertension, with complaints of abdominal distension, failure to thrive, recurrent fever, and with history of 2 blood transfusions in the past. So what can be the provisional diagnosis? So now examination was done, and in which the child was alert, active, conscious, and was recognizing parents, was vitally stable with saturation of 97%, and was afebrile on examination. Pallor was present, but there was no signs of icterus, edema, lymphadenopathy, sinuses, or clubbing. Child was weighing 4.2 kgs, while the expected weight at 7 months of age is 7.2 kgs. Length was 63 cm and the head circumference was 43 cm. So this was suggestive of the failure to thrive, as the weight for age was less than the third center. In head-to-toe examination, the eyes appeared to be bulging with blue sclera. There was protruding tongue with abdominal distension. I would like to mention that consent of parents was taken to show the photographs, and rest all was normal.
Clinical criteria.
Yes.
Sir, abdominal distension we see first by inspection, that is the protruding abdomen, and then during examination also we can see the abdominal distension. So abdominal, and then in examination we take the abdominal girth, but there has not been clear-cut normal values for the abdominal girth. Usually in case of infants, if it is more than 35 cm, we consider it as abdominal distension.
I think by knowledge, the abdomen is crossing apart from the symptom over the GF-stern, distended, and going over the GF-stern. Yes. Then you can label it as abdominal distension.
Sir, that becomes
apart from the symptom has to be there.
Yes, sir. Sir, that becomes in severe abdominal distension. Otherwise, if it is mild or moderate abdominal distension, it may not be bulging beyond the GF-stern. At that stage, it starts causing respiratory distress also. If it is bulging, GF-stern.
Any pediatrician consultant who can define what is the abdominal distension in the unit? कॉपी होगी आप पीडीटी सर बता
Because there is no clear-cut of values for abdominal distension, we are taking the abdominal girth. But usually in first years, if more than 30, we are little bit cautious. But usually because sometimes child might be low birth weight, so even 30, even maybe 27 might be abdominal distension, considering the weight of the child. So sometimes child might be underweight. So that's why inspection is more important rather than any value which can define that there is abdominal distension.
The right costal margin in the midclavicular line with lever span of 8 cm. As in infants, normally up to 2 cm of lever can be palpable. So the enlargement was considered to be 3 cm. So hepatomegaly was non-tender, which was firm with smooth surface and rounded border. Spleen was palpable 3 cm below the left costal margin. Breast examination was normal. Breast systemic examination was normal. So a quick review of our child after the examination is 7 months old infant born at 35 weeks with low birth weight with antenatal history of severe oligohydramnios and gestational hypertension with complaints of abdominal distension, failure to thrive, recurrent fever. On examination, hepatosplenomegaly was present with bulging eyes, protruding tongue, blue sclera, moderate developmental delay and with history of 2 blood transfusions in the past. So now what can be the provisional diagnosis? What diagnosis can be added after the examination?
पीछे से आवाज आ रही थी एरिथ्रोसिस डिजीज
Now surgical coordination हो चुका है, correct.
You can start with tropical fever. What was the nature of fever?
Ma'am, fever was for our when patient came to us on examination, he was febrile. In past, he had history of fever.
Any history whether it was high grade or intermittent or
Was low grade, ma'am.
We can start deleting some of the surgical findings.
Yes, ma'am.
metabolic problem?
Yes, ma'am. So after the examination, the DD of connective tissue disorders, as the sclera was blue, blue sclera was noted and hepatosplenomegaly was found. So connective tissue disorders DD was added. Further workup was done in which HB was low, which was 9 gram per deciliter. TLC and platelets was normal. CRP and ASL was negative. PVF was done which revealed microcytic hypochromic anemia. No spherocytes or leptocytes was seen. Retics count and ferritin was normal. LFT was deranged in the form of SGOT and SGPT raised. Dyslipidemia was seen in the form of low HDL, increased VLDL and triglycerides. Thyroid profile was normal. Urine routine was normal. Urine reducing sugar was done, which was negative. Hemoglobin electrophoresis didn't detect the abnormal hemoglobin. Antiviral markers were non-reactive. Torch profile was done and was not detected. X-rays were normal. USG whole abdomen was done with the Doppler study, which revealed hepatosplenomegaly and no portal hypertension. And the blood and urine cultures were sterile. So after the examination, hematological causes has been ruled out as hemoglobin electrophoresis didn't detect the abnormal hemoglobin and the PVA was normal. Infective causes has been ruled out on the basis of torch profile and antiviral markers. Connective tissue disorders has been ruled out as the X-rays were normal and there was no history of fractures. And galactosemia was ruled out as the urine reducing sugar was normal, was negative. And the surgical causes have been ruled out as there was no renal mass or hepatic tumor seen in the sonography and no cyst was seen. So what we were now left with was the metabolic disorders. So I would like to invite Dr. Sophia Chaudhary as we refer the case in Ophtho department in view of bulging eyes.
Thank you, Dr. Bansi. Good morning, everyone. A case of prominent eyes with blue sclera was referred to us by Department of Pediatrics. The parents complained of abdominal distension and failure to thrive. On torchlight examination, we found out that the cornea appeared enlarged, the sclera appeared bluish, pupils were round, regular and reactive, fixation and following torchlight was normal. On examination under sedation, the lid positions were normal, no scleral show was present. The corneal diameter measured by calipers came out to be 12.5 millimeters, which was large for age. Corneal apex measured from lateral orbital margin was 17 millimeters, normal for age. By this, we ruled out proptosis clinically. Transparency and shape of cornea was normal. The intraocular pressure recorded was 10 millimeters of mercury. On fundus examination, the glow was normal. The retinal vessels were normal in caliber and contour. The disc margins were well defined and no cupping was seen. And no cherry red spot was also noted. So finally, we reached to the diagnosis of megalocornea or buphthalmus, also known as congenital glaucoma. Megalocornea, any corneal diameter more than 12.5 millimeters is suggested. Buphthalmus comprises of enlarged eyes, blue sclera. It has a typical presentation triad of lacrimation, photophobia and blepharospasm. The cornea appears hazy with HAPS striae. HAPS striae are horizontal breaks in the descemet membrane of the cornea. The intraocular pressure may be raised and optic disc cupping may be seen. In our case, the corneal diameter was 12.5 millimeters at 7 months. So this goes in favor of megalocornea. Though the eyes were enlarged and blue sclera was present, but blue sclera can be a normal finding in infants as well. There is no complaint of lacrimation, photophobia and blepharospasm. The cornea didn't appear hazy, nor HAPS striae were present. The intraocular pressures were normal and optic disc cupping was also not seen. So we made a diagnosis of megalocornea. Megalocornea can be found out as an isolated finding, or it can be present associated with ocular and systemic abnormalities. Like as shown in Marfan's disease, metabolic storage diseases, albinism, Neumeier syndrome, and osteogenesis imperfecta. Now, thank you. I would like to hand over the mic to Bansi to tell you the case further.
Of history taking, examination and investigations, the provisional diagnosis of metabolic liver disease was made. So, liver biopsy was done to narrow down our diagnosis. So, I would like to invite Dr. Manish Vijayvargiya sir to guide us regarding the biopsy.
Good morning everyone. So, after the clinical workup, liver biopsy was taken and submitted to the histopathology department. What we are seeing here is core of hepatic parenchyma. This one is core of hepatic parenchyma, and at this magnification we can see these are the hepatocytes, these polygonal cells, and in between these hepatocytes there are some cells. This one is portal tract. This one is portal tract, and in the portal tract we can see some cells which is having clear cytoplasm. At the further higher magnification, at this magnification, we can see these are the normal hepatocytes. These are polygonal cells with round nuclei. These are the normal hepatocytes. And these fluffy, large, vacuolated cells with the small round nuclei, these are the foam cells. These foam cells are not normally present in liver tissue. Normal portion is this one. And these are the abnormal cells, that is foamy cells. These one. Again at the further higher magnification, in between the normal hepatocytes, we can see scattered foamy cells. We call them foamy cells, foamy histiocytes. This one, and in clusters at places. At the further 40x magnification, we can see these foamy histiocytes. These foamy histiocytes show multi-vacuolation, giving rise to a soap bubble appearance with small round nuclei. These are the normal hepatocytes, and these are the abnormal foamy histiocytes present in singly as well as in clusters. So what are the differential of these foamy cells in normal liver tissue? These are not normal to liver tissue, but when they are present, foamy cells present, we can consider they can be present either in hypercholesterolemia condition or Tangiers disease. In hypercholesterol, since patient serum cholesterol is normal, hypercholesterolemia is ruled out. Other one is Tangier disease. Tangier, T-A-N-G, Tangier disease. Tangier disease is another inherited condition in which there is deficiency of high density lipoproteins, HDL proteins. HDL helps in transportation of cholesterol. So again, cholesterol is normal, so Tangier disease again ruled out. The other condition that can cause foamy cells in normal liver tissue is disorders that causes massive cell destruction, that overburdens the body's capacity to digest the lipids. So and these conditions are thalassemia, sickle cell disease, another condition is idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, and another thing is chronic renal failure. Since clinical workup is negative for all these conditions, so these thalassemia, sickle cell anemia all ruled out in this condition. So what left is storage disease. So in the storage disease we have metabolic liver disease. In the metabolic liver disease we have glycogen storage disease and lipid storage disease, lysosomal storage disease. So to differentiate between glycogen storage disease and lysosomal storage disease, we have some stents. We put some stents. This one is PAS stent. So PAS is a periodic acid shift reagent. This stents glycogen. So if glycogen is present in the cells, PAS will be positive. So in this case, these are the normal hepatocytes and these are the foamy cells. So we are seeing here foamy cells are negative for PAS, while the normal hepatocytes which show normal intrahepatic glycogen, which is PAS positive. So PAS is positive in normal intrahepatic glycogen, but this PAS reagent is negative in these foamy cells, which are present in clusters as well as in single cells in between lobular parenchyma of liver tissue. Again, higher magnification. This is PAS stain. This is PAS stain. So PAS is negative, means foamy cells that don't contain glycogen. So glycogen storage disease is ruled out. So what left is lysosomal storage disease. So on histopathology, our diagnosis was metabolic liver disease, which favored lysosomal storage disorders. So again, the lysosomal storage disorder we can classify on the basis of clinical picture and histopathological criteria. We can further classify in 4 groups. The first one is neuronal lipidosis, that is deposition of lipid inside the neuronal processes and body, which is ruled out in this condition. We don't have deposition, we have deposition in foamy cells. Another condition is leukodystrophy, that is deposition of lipid in oligodendrocytes, that comes under CNS category. The third one is mucopolysaccharidosis, that is deposition of lipid in extraneural tissue. And the fourth is storage histiocytosis, that is deposition of lipid inside the histiocytes. That is our condition. So this is storage histiocytosis, and under storage histiocytosis we have 2 conditions. The first one is Gaucher disease and second one is Niemann-Pick disease. So on the histology we cannot differentiate between Gaucher disease and Niemann-Pick disease. For that we need enzyme assay and genetic study. So our diagnosis was metabolic liver disease favoring lysosomal storage disease. Further to narrow down it is storage histiocytosis with possibility of Gaucher disease and Niemann-Pick disease.
Thank you, sir, for guiding us with your beautiful slides. Now I would like to invite Rekha ma'am, as the case was given as provisional diagnosis of lysosomal storage disorders. The case was referred to genetics department for further confirmation.
So, a case of 7-month-old male infant with hepatosplenomegaly, failure to thrive and developmental delay, in which motor delay was more than cognitive delay, and there was history of blood transfusion, and liver histology was in favor of metabolic liver disease were referred to us. So, in this differential was lysosomal storage disorder. So lysosomal storage disorder is a large group in which around 30 enzyme deficiency and 30 disorders are there. So we narrow down our diagnosis. So in this lysosomal storage disorder, one, you have heard a large group of mucopolysaccharidosis. That is different. In that there is coarse facies are there. One second group is in which neurodegeneration starts, in which patient presents with regression of gain milestone. And third group is this, which our patient present in which clinical picture is like that of hemolytic anemia, hepatosplenomegaly is there, motor delay may be there, and motor delay is there, but cognitive delay is less in these cases. So our case was similar to this group, and in this group basic two diseases are Gaucher and Niemann-Pick, but still we are not sure that it belongs to this group or something else. So for that we have genetic test. Genetic test basically help us to pinpoint our diagnosis. It can pick up a gene and can tell us that this is the genetic, this is the disorder. So it gives us a definitive diagnosis. And second thing, when we get a genetic diagnosis, then these disorders have a continuum disorder occurs. Course of illness is different in these disorders. So we can make a genotype-phenotype correlation also. And third thing, if disorder is severe presentation, satisfactory treatment is not available, then we can prevent the recurrence of this disorder in next pregnancy by offering the prenatal diagnosis. And fourth help of genetic testing is that nowadays enzyme replacement therapies are also available for genetic disorders. So we can offer these therapy also. So when we offer the genetic test to couple, then there are many tests in our basket. So we basically have two categories of genetic test. One genetic test for chromosomal disorder and second genetic test for single gene disorder. So first of all, we have to categorize that our patient belongs to which category. Like in chromosomal disorder, if we categorize our patient as a chromosomal disorder, then we have tests like FISH, karyotype, microarray. And second is single gene disorder. If we have categorized our patient as a single gene disorder, then we have tests like one is sequencing of a particular gene, and nowadays we have NGS, next generation sequencing, in which many genes can be sequenced in one go. And for that there are few panels like clinical exome testing is available, in which all the genes for genetic syndromes, known genetic syndromes, like in OMIM we have inherited data of genetic syndromes. So all the known genes are sequenced in clinical exome. And second name is whole exome testing. In whole exome testing, all of the exomes of all of the coding part of our genome are sequenced in whole exome testing. Then if their disorder is very rare and we have not made the diagnosis, still we are suspecting that it is genetic disorder, then we can go for the exome testing of trio, in which both parents and child testing we offer. And if we don't get anything in whole exome testing of trio, then we can offer whole genome testing also. So these are various tests to offer the patient, but our case belong to basically lysosomal storage disorder. And lysosomal storage disorder are due to enzyme deficiency into the lysosome, and these enzymes are coded by single genes. So basically this is a single gene disorder. So we need to go for the single gene disorder testing. Like these are various single gene disorders. So our patient belong to single gene disorder category. So we offer the single gene disorder testing, and this was we offer the whole exome testing to the couple, because whole exome testing covers all of the coding part of genome. So we offer the testing of whole exome testing, and in whole exome testing the result came out that mutation was present in SMPD1 gene. This gene is sphingomyelinase phosphodiesterase deficiency 1 gene, and this gene is for Niemann-Pick disease. Niemann-Pick disease type A and B both have similar gene mutations. So to interpret a genetic report, first we need to look what is the disease we have diagnosed here. It was Niemann-Pick disease, and it was highly suspicious for us. So we have made the diagnosis that we suspected for Niemann-Pick disease, and mutation also found in the Niemann-Pick disease gene. One thing is that, and second we have to look inheritance pattern. What is the inheritance pattern of this disease? Like this disease is inherited in family in autosomal recessive mode. autosomal recessive mode, it means both of the parents are carrier in autosomal recessive mode, and these carriers we cannot recognize by our eyes. They are asymptomatic, but they may have a child with symptoms. It means they are carrier, because in autosomal recessive disorder, to present the symptoms, both genes should be defective. If one gene is defective, one is normal, they will be normal. So both are carriers, so there is 25% chance that they will have a progeny which have both defective genes and which will present with symptoms. So this is an autosomal recessive disease. So by default, both parents are carrier in this case. And as I have told you that mutation should be received from both of the parents, so it should be homozygous mutation. Like in our genome, we have half of the genome we receive from mother, half from father. So for each function we have two genes, one from mother and one from father, and both gene functions equally. And when both of the gene are defective, then we call it as homozygous. And autosomal recessive disorders present when both of the genes are defective from both of the parents. So it could be either homozygous, and sometime when both of the genes are defective but one parents give different mutation and another parents gives different mutation, then we call it as compound heterozygous. So our patient received similar mutation from both parents, so he was homozygous for the mutation. And third thing, we have to look the classification, what kind of this mutation is. Classification tells that the mutation which is present in the gene, it is either causing defect in the gene or not. For that there are various classification criteria. So when there is written in the box pathogenic, it means if this mutation is present in the gene, it will call loss of function of that gene. So this is disease causing. We are sure that if this mutation is present in gene, then gene will not function. And likely pathogenic is also important, but here scientific evidence is lacking. Like we do scientific evidence, like sometimes same mutation is present other families also which present with Niemann-Pick disease, but functional studies are still lacking, because when a mutation we get, then functional studies in the lab should be there. They do in animal studies and all studies that this gene if mutated in that animal and then cause dysfunction of that function. So these scientific studies also there. So if scientific studies are lacking, then we call it as likely pathogenic. And sometimes mutations are classified as VOUS, variant of uncertain significance. It means still they are not either benign and they are not appropriately we can call it pathogenic. They can be pathogenic in future if further studies will prove that this mutation is causing the disease. So to interpreting a report, we need to look all these things. First, phenotype criteria, second, mode of inheritance, third, zygosity, and then either it is pathogenic. So in this case, we have made the diagnosis or established the diagnosis on the basis of mutation that our patient belongs to Niemann-Pick disease. And Niemann-Pick disease is due to basically defect in sphingomyelin phosphodiesterase 1 gene, and this gene is present on chromosome 11 on short arm. This gene has 6 exons, and this gene synthesizes acid sphingomyelinase enzyme. This enzyme functions, this basically acid sphingomyelinase enzyme cause sphingomyelin to convert into ceramide and phosphocholine. When this gene is defective, then sphingomyelin get accumulated in various organs in the body like spleen, liver, lungs, bones, and neurons also. So various symptoms to the patient come as per accumulation of this sphingomyelin in various organs. So but as per the mutation, this disease, presentation of disease can be of 3 various categories. Like one is very severe form, infantile neurovisceral form, which we call as Niemann-Pick disease type A. Second is chronic neurovisceral, intermediate category, in which we call it A-B. And one is chronic visceral, in which no neurological involvement is there. So in infantile neurovisceral acid sphingomyelinase deficiency, onset is early, severe hepatosplenomegaly is there, and cherry red spot and all these things are there, and there is certain degree of development is there, and then the regression happens, and their lifespan is also less. In chronic neurovisceral, they may go to up to childhood, and in chronic visceral, they generally present with no neurodegeneration is there. They generally onset in childhood or adulthood, and survival may be adulthood. And by the genetic study, we can found the mutation. As the mutation which was present in our case, it was previously reported in the patients with Niemann-Pick disorder, and this was categorized as severe mutation because this mutation causes the severe phenotype, and child's expired within the 3 year of age. So when we diagnose a genetic disorder, then genetic counseling of the couple is very important because genetic disorders are basically familial disorders. There is recurrence in the family members, and other family member may also have risk for having such type of children. So genetic counseling is very important for genetic disorders. So in genetic counseling, we counsel the couple about the mode of inheritance. We tell them that it is an autosomal recessive disorder, and we tell them that both parents are carrier in such disorders, and there is risk of recurrence is 25% in next offspring. And we can also educate them that if they don't want recurrence of such offspring in next pregnancy, then we can prevent the disorder by doing the chorionic villus sampling. We do this chorionic villus sampling at 12 weeks of pregnancy. We take small sample from the placenta, and in placenta there are fetal villi are there. So DNA is extracted from that sample, and testing can be done that this fetus will have Niemann-Pick disease or not have. If it is not having Niemann-Pick disease, they may continue the pregnancy, and if fetus is having Niemann-Pick disease and they don't want to continue the baby of Niemann-Pick disease, they may opt for termination of the pregnancy. And this test we routinely offering to couples at our hospital. We did this patient the follow-up also because basically follow-up tells us that phenotype in which direction is going the phenotype of our child. So in follow-up we find that milestones were delayed, still they were delayed. Child had not gained further milestone after 7 to 8 months, and now the child had bilateral cherry red spot in eyes, abdominal girths or more increased, it was around 42 centimeter, liver span increased, spleen was also increased. So the child was getting more and more severe phenotype, and mutation in this case which we get from the genetic testing was also severe type of mutation. So we were on the diagnosis that our child belongs to a category of Niemann-Pick disease type A. Now, as the cherry red spot was seen in our case in follow-up, so Dr. Sophia will tell how she looked the cherry red spot in the eyes.
Thank you, ma'am. On follow-up, an eye examination was conducted again. There was no presence of blue sclera now. On fundus examination, we noted a cherry red spot. As you can see here, this is a photo of indirect ophthalmoscopy which was done. So here, for more explanation, there's a comparative picture of a normal fundus and a fundus showing cherry red spot. In health, the retina appears red, even though it's transparent because it transmits the glow of choroidal vasculature. In storage diseases like lysosomal storage disease, there's abnormal deposition of lipid material, or in blunt trauma or central retinal artery occlusion, there can be retinal edema, which looks like white, which makes retina look like white. So that is the reason, and since fovea is a very thin transparent structure, it continues to give the glow of choroid. So thus, that is the reason a cherry red spot is seen. Here are some differential diagnoses of cherry red spot. It can be seen in central retinal artery occlusion, in blunt trauma, in lysosomal storage diseases like in our case, in inflammation like retinitis, in drug toxicities like quinine toxicity or methanol, carbon monoxide poisoning, and a macular hole with surrounding retinal detachment can also mimic a cherry red spot. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Dr. Gaurav Agarwal sir to tell you about the management of case.
Thank you, Sophia. Good morning to all. The disease of Niemann-Pick is now classified as acid sphingomyelinase deficiencies, rare disease with prevalence of 1 per 2 lakh of the population. There was deficiency of acid sphingomyelinase in our case. So the drug for this is olipase alpha. This is the exogenous source of acid sphingomyelinase, and this is the enzyme replacement therapy. It has very recently been approved by the US Food and Drug Administration. But in India, still the drug controller approval is pending. We are going to register this case to Rare Disease Portal, which is portal by the government of Rajasthan for providing medicines to such children. Now the take home message from this case we get is pedigree is not just useful for the selection of marriage partner or elite pets, but also to ascertain some familial genetic disorders by thorough family history taking. A stepwise approach to any genetic disorder will surely help to reach the diagnosis. With this, we are very much thankful to the administration and management of our Mahatma Gandhi Hospital, who has provided us a state-of-the-art infrastructure that made us able to diagnose this rare disorder which has been missed out at other reputed institutes. Thank you, sir. Is now 13 months old, and since this enzyme replacement therapy has not been approved till now, there is increase in liver size and spleen. Sir, we are going to register this to Rare Disease Portal, and since the drug has not been approved.
Came in August and we diagnosed, early diagnosis was when?
Sir, September.
4-5 महीने हुए ना.
Sir, in this case, we have consulted the Rare Disease Center, which is JK Hospitals. There is portion. Ashok Gupta sir and Priyanshu Mathur we have consulted. They told that till DCGI approval is not there, Director General DCGI approval is not there, we can't register on the portal. No Niemann-Pick disease case is registered on the portal. Although Gaucher disease is registered, maybe 20 or 30 are registered already. Because approval for this drug is recently 6 or 7 months back only.
We could have written directly to DGC.
We can, but there are some procedural things are there. We can write them, sir. I will see if directly we can approach to
This
them.
is sort of emergency, very rare case, and our hospital and our department they have done wonderful job in this case.
Yes.
If we write directly to DGCI, then I think.
We can write.
And he's friend of my younger brother, RS, DGCI.
I will write down to write.
One thing more, genetic study of the parents, carrier status of the parents.
Yes, sir. In this case, for carrier status, actually, we asked them to do the carrier screening, but they have not opted. And actually, in autosomal recessive disorder, by default, parents are carrier. So for further prenatal testing, we don't need their testing, that they should get the testing done. But we have offered them that you should opt, but obviously these are these costs, so they have not opted. So.
You also mentioned about the child that came up in the history which was taken repeatedly in the other family members.
Yes. Now, in next visit, when we asked repeatedly, then they told that his sister's son is also affected with hepatosplenomegaly, but diagnosis still has not made, and they have not bring the child to us. So we are not sure that this is a similar disorder or something else. But obviously, parents are carrier, then sister may be carrier, and by chance if her spouse is also carrier, then recurrence of the disorder may be there in the family. So, but still we need the child.
What will be the cost of the genetic testing?
Here actually genetic costs around 15 to 20,000, sir. For clinical exams, labs offer the 15,000 around, and for whole exome testing they offer 20,000.
Dr. Rekha, the previous speaker told something on the common note about this case. He told that about choosing the marriage partner. What are the practical things being applied?
Sir, actually,
Apart from Kundalini Milan.
nowadays really it's possible. You can do that thing because nowadays we are offering carrier screening of couples. So in carrier screening, we can do genetic sequencing of both couples. If you are really doing an arranged marriage and you are choosing the partner on the basis of gene kundali, then we can offer the carrier screening, and we all are carrier for 5 to 6 deleterious disorders. If both are carrier for different diseases, they can be married. If they are carrier for similar disorder, then they have recurrence of 25% of that disorder in their offspring. So we can do that, but
Are we offering this?
no, sir. Actually, we offer it to the couple, which comes to us for counseling after marriage.
Before marriage?
No, sir.
So I think let's complete, and we are really proud of the oncopathology department, genetic department, and neonatology department. It is wonderful presentation, and now I think standard is really going high.